This is our second week of talking about small group leader training. And so whether you're in a life group or whether you're leading a Bible study or whatever, this class is designed to help you as you prepare and lead your small groups. And our topic today, our goal today, is to help you guys get beneath the surface with your groups. So we're going to be focusing on some techniques today, a lot of practical things, a lot of, not a ton of me teaching actually, just a few little, I've got a couple little thoughts here from the scriptures, and then we're actually going to practice and kind of have some fun together with all of this. So what I'd like to do is I'll pray first, and then we're going to start in Matthew chapter 21. And we're going to look at one instance of many where Jesus asks some questions. And then we're going to do an activity together and see if I can't get you guys a little flustered at me here. We'll have some fun together. So let's pray, and then we'll dive in. Heavenly Father, we are grateful for the opportunity to gather together this morning in your name and as followers of your Son Jesus. And we ask that as we are laboring to mold and shape and develop and encourage the people that are in our and under our leadership, pray, Father, that you would give us the skills that we need, the wisdom that we need, and the passion and devotion that we need to lead them effectively. And I pray that this time together would be encouraging, and that we would learn some things and be able to put them into practice. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so Jesus is the question asker. He is the man who knows how to get beneath the surface with people, and he does it very effectively. He does it in a number of different ways for a lot of different purposes. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of show you one instance of this in Matthew 21, and then we'll do an activity together here really quickly. So at the beginning of Matthew 21, Jesus has made his triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And as he makes his way in, he does the cursing of the fig tree. And then every time he goes up to the temple, the Pharisees, of course, have something to say to him. And every time, and we've seen this over the course of the 3 years of Jesus' official ministry with the disciples, that the Pharisees were always critical of him. They were threatened by Jesus. They felt like he was going to disrupt the religion the way that they had established it, and he was going to overturn things and make the Romans unhappy, and so they wanted to silence Jesus as quickly as possible, because if the Romans got unhappy, then they would shut down temple sacrifice, temple worship, the whole 9 yards, and then everything would be finished. So they had to keep him quiet. So they're always challenging Jesus' authority. When Jesus responds to their authority, though, it's always interesting because he never deals with them in a direct way. He always deals with them with questions, or he always deals with them in a way that is a little bit kind of a curveball. You never really know kind of where he's going or what he's trying to do. But at the end, everybody seems to get the message. So when we get to verse 23, you have another instance of this. It says this, verse 23. When Jesus entered the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him while he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority?" In Jesus' day, and in the Jewish culture, even still to this day, you don't just go teaching. You don't just open up shop and start teaching stuff. You got to have credentials. And in Jesus' day, the way you got credentials was through a rabbi and studying under a rabbi. In fact, if you read some history about the Apostle Paul, you'll find out he talks about, "I am a Pharisee of Pharisees. I studied under a guy named Gamaliel, who was one of the most well-known Pharisees of his time." So you would always talk about your qualification for teaching, where you get the authority. Today, we don't really talk about the person that we studied underneath. We talk about the degree that we got. Okay, so if I get up here and I say, "Well, I have a degree from Houston Elementary School, and that's why I feel like I'm qualified to teach this class today," you're like, "Really?" Or you could say something like, "Well, I have a master's in Christian education from Dallas Theological Seminary." And I'm like, "Oh, I've heard of that place. Those are cool guys over there. I like them. All right, I'll listen to you." Whatever it is. But sometimes you don't just like We can't just pull some guy off the street and put him in the pulpit over there on Sunday morning and say, hey, let's hear what you have to say. We're really interested. You have to have some sort of authority. And the Pharisees were basically, you guys ever ask somebody a question, but you're really not asking a question? You're really making a statement. Are you going to wear that? Translation, don't wear that. Okay? Those are questions that aren't questions. And the Pharisees ask one here. By what authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority? That's not a question. That's a statement. We don't think you have authority. We know you don't have authority. Who do you think you are? You should leave. Okay? They're communicating something. And Jesus, as generous and as gracious as he tends to be, and as wise as he is, as a teacher and as a leader. So don't forget. So let's say I'm teaching, like this, and Fritz hobbles in here, his one leg, stiff and everything. And he hobbles in here and he goes, just interrupts me. And I'm, you guys are listening to me, you're paying attention. He just interrupts me and says, hey, I haven't seen your seminary credentials. What was your GPA at Dallas Seminary? Excuse me? Wait a second. What would you do? How would you handle that? Some of us might start getting an argument with the guy. Sometimes hey, excuse me for 1 second. Let me go talk to him. What Jesus does is he harnesses the opportunity and he uses it to his advantage. And he uses it to teach the elders and the scribes and the Pharisees as well as the people who are sitting and listening to him teach. And every good teacher knows how to harness a question and how to use a question to go deeper beyond what the issue is. Okay? So the question on the front end is, hey, what are your credentials? How do you have the authority? But every good teacher knows how to get below the surface and go, okay, what's the real reason why you're asking me about authority here? And I want you to see it, and I also want the people who are listening to me to see what's going on. So Jesus says, wisely, he answers a question with a question. He says, I will ask you one thing, in which if you tell me, I will also tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John was from what source? From heaven or from men? So he pulls a question out of nowhere. And you're like, what, John? What are you talking about? I don't understand. Where's this coming from? Totally out of left field. Totally surprising. The people who are listening to him, it's got his attention, and it's got the scribes and the elders' attention. And then they circle up, and all right, guys, now if we say it's from God, then he's going to say this. So we can't say that. That's a trap. But hey, if we say it's from men, then he's going to say this. So we can't say that either. It's a trap. Don't answer. Let's say we don't know. Good idea. And so they come back and they say, and answering Jesus, they said, we do not know. And so Jesus also said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. He never answers the question that's asked of him. And in some cases, some people might say, oh, okay, you got a little something squirrely going on there. You don't have the credentials. You're just trying to hide it and cover it up. But instead, Jesus uses his authority. He demonstrates his authority by asking the question. And their inability to answer his question demonstrates their lack of authority over him, number one. But then number two, it also tells Jesus a few things, and it tells his audience a few things. And they say, if we say it's from heaven, he will say to us, then why did you not believe him? And if we say from men, we fear the people, for they all regard John as a prophet. Questions helped him understand the true motives and intentions of his audience, in particular the people who are questioning his authority. So questions always give insight. Okay? Now, that's just one example of Jesus using questions well to provoke his audience, to help teach, to help expose, to do all these sorts of things. What I'd like to do is we're going to start by talking about questions this morning, and then we're going to talk about depth. Okay? So when it comes to questions, there are 7 things that you need to do to make sure your questions are excellent. Okay? 7 things. And then we're going to practice. Okay? So point number 1, good questions should always be genuine. Good questions should always be genuine. You guys ever been in a small group where, or a Bible study or something where the teacher's got the curriculum in front of them and they've taught you, they've said something and they've taught something out of the text, and then they look and they say, okay, so now I'm supposed to ask, what other passages remind you of how Jesus asked good questions? Right? How many of you guys really want to answer that question? I mean, I don't, just on general principle. Regardless of whether or not it's a good question, if the person teaching the lesson didn't even know what the question was and they had to read it to me out of a book, I'm like not even interested. No thanks. Genuine questions should be natural. They should be relaxed. They should be you should already know the questions that you're wanting to ask. They shouldn't feel forced. Okay, so that's principle number 1. They got to feel genuine. Okay. Number 2, good questions are always a means to an end. Good questions are always a means to an end. Questions are valuable tools because they can help guide discussion. They can help correct. They can help encourage. They can challenge and make things more difficult. And they can spur and ignite learning, a desire to learn and to grow, self-learning that way. However, they should not be used as fireworks. Questions should not be used for show. They should not be only for provocation. Okay? Some people use questions and ask questions and throw them out there like hand grenades and say, hey, wasn't that an awesome question? Without intention. So questions should always have intention. Just like I don't wield a hammer without intention, and if I do, people start getting hurt. Questions are the same way. They're very valuable tools, but they have to be wielded with purpose and intention. Number 3, good questions should lead to more good questions. Good questions should lead to more good questions. And you guys ever heard about this? You guys take communication courses in college or whatever, but questions that are always called open questions instead of closed questions. So your kids come home from school. Did you have a good day at school today? Uh-huh. Oh, okay. It's kind of a dead end. Like, what? Did you go to PE? Uh-huh. So the object of asking a question is to where, how can I ask a question where uh-huh, or sure, or yes, or no is not an appropriate answer? You guys watch the news, and you guys like sports? You guys seen this guy named Marshawn Lynch, the running back for the Seattle Seahawks? These reporters are asking him questions, and he's continuing to answer them with statements so he doesn't have to answer the question. Thank you for asking. Yes. No. He's intentionally giving closed answers based on the questions, but the reporters continue to give him questions that are closed. I'm like, ask him a difficult question. Maybe he might actually answer it. Try to corner him a little bit, but he can't. So one of my favorite things to do, and this incorporates several principles, and we'll talk about some of the rest of them, is I had some of my former students come in town the other day, and instead of telling me, so, how are you? Good. Oh, dang it. Okay. No, I know I shouldn't ask that kind of a question. So I haven't seen them in a while. I want to catch up on their life. I know there's probably some job stuff. There's probably some, boyfriend or girlfriend stuff. And there's probably some, church stuff going on in their life. Okay, so how about this? So, you doing okay? Great. It's good to see you. Great. So, tell me, how about this? If your life was a newspaper, what would be the headlines on the front page of your life for the past 6 months since I've seen you last? Oh, and they go, and that immediately, almost every time they'll go, ooh, They're intrigued, they're challenged, they like the question, like, let me think about that. And they don't speak. And then what they give me is a very genuine answer, a very honest response, and one that probably gives me more information than I would have had otherwise. If I said, hey, so what's the latest with you? And they've got 50 different things that's the latest with them, and they don't even know where to begin. So if you can focus it and say, hey, what would be the headlines on the sports page? Or hey, what would be the headlines in the religion section of if your life was a newspaper, what would be the headlines on the front page or something like that? So just take a normal question and spice it up a little bit, and it just kind of helps to change the pace a little bit. So number one, good questions should be genuine. Good questions should be a means to an end, number two. Number three, good questions should lead to more good questions. And as leaders, don't settle for answers. You always want to be thinking about how you can follow up on the question that you asked. Number four, good questions should not always be answered. Good questions should not always be answered. The suspense of a good unanswered question is very motivating. It keeps people hungry. It keeps people searching for answers. It challenges them. And most importantly, it allows them to experience the joy of discovering the answer on their own. And 9 times out of 10, a person who discovers the answer to a question on their own instead of being spoon-fed the answer by a teacher will be much more likely to remember and apply that answer. Number 5, good questions should be the supplement to your teaching, not the substance of it. Good questions should supplement your teaching, not be the substance of it. Sometimes people will get into small groups and they'll just have a list of questions. No answers, no teaching, no Bible, nothing, just a list of questions. And that's not always the most appropriate thing. So make sure that your questions are used to supplement the teaching that you're wanting your audience to hear, not just the substance of it. Number 6, good questions should be well-timed and placed, just like a bomb. Good questions should be well-timed and placed, just like a bomb. You don't want to use a good question at the wrong time, just like you don't want to set a bomb off at the wrong time. You want to be out of the room and far away before that thing explodes, all right? Questions function in much the same way. You ask a good question too soon, people just stand there and be like, I don't want to answer that question. That's too hard. I'm not ready to be vulnerable. I'm not answering that question. Dude, how did you even come up with that question? I don't know. I'm not answering. Me neither. You ask a question too late, then the answer is immediate. They've already learned the principle. Now the spice of the question is gone. It doesn't make any sense to ask the question anymore. And then your group they'll give you a sympathy answer because they're like, oh, that's cute. He tried to ask a good question. I'll answer it just to make him feel better. Poor guy. He doesn't want to do that either. And then finally, good questions should be unexpected and unusual. Good questions should be unexpected and unusual. Okay? Any questions about those principles before we practice them? Okay, go for it.
The example that you used with Christ and the Pharisees leaders, I think it's in violation of your point number 1. I don't think it was a genuine question. I think it was a stab back at
It is certainly a statement. It is very much a statement at the Pharisees. They made a statement to him, but he is repaying them and dealing with them on a way that will be most stimulating to them. If he's going to be challenged, I don't think Jesus does and does these things out of spite as much as he's doing things out of, I'm speaking the language that they speak. And if they're going to be challenging to me, then okay, let's be challenging back in a way that they respect. They respect authority. They respect credential. They respect things that are important in the eyes of men. Jesus says, okay, you want to evaluate me by that? How about you look in the mirror first? And let's talk about where your authority comes from. But you notice, Jesus doesn't say, where does your authority come from? He asks it without asking it. And that's the genius of his question, is that he gets them to get to the answer of, whoa, this guy's got more authority than we do, without ever breaching the subject. He talks about the baptism of John. It's totally unusual and completely unexpected. And it gets to the point where he's got him, you know? And that's the genius of Jesus. That sounds weird. That's what I think is really remarkable.
I might distinguish between an audience.
Mm-hmm.
What we're talking about here is leading our life group, generally a group of believers, versus someone who's challenging us.
Certainly.
Like the Pharisees were doing to Christ.
Certainly.
So, I think maybe good questions back to someone who is challenging versus a life group situation is may not have all 7 of these principles.
Absolutely. And yeah, and this one doesn't have, and these are my principles. Jesus probably has 1,500 principles of his, I don't know. But this particular illustration doesn't cover all 7 of the principles that I have for you, because I know that I'm about to do an illustration with you guys, and that's going to cover some of the principles. So let's do that. And this is going to require a little bit of activity on your part, and I know most people don't like this very much, but actually we need to sit in a circle for this. And so I know this is going to make us get up and move, and adults don't like to do that. So let's pretend like we're all in a life group right now, and we've had our dinner or whatever our social function is for the evening. We've sat around. Now it's time to get down to business, and we're gonna have our lesson. Okay, and let's pretend that our topic or our lesson for our life group today is all about being a disciple of Jesus, what it means to be a follower of Christ. Okay, and so let's say we're reading a book, and then we're supplementing it with Bible discussion and that sort of thing. Okay, make sense? Pretty good. So, as the leader, I have some Bible teaching that I want to walk you through. I want to take you through. Let's say tonight we're going to talk about Mark 3:14 and 15, which talks about, and Jesus selected 12 to be with him, to give him authority to send them out to preach and give them authority to cast out demons. And so we're going to talk about how that verse should influence the way that we are disciples and how we make disciples ourselves. Or we might talk about Matthew 28 and the Great Commission, or something like that. So I have a body of scripture and content that we will get to. But as soon as we sit down, one of my main objectives as a group leader is to pique your curiosity. Okay? Because I don't want to just sit around and go, all right, guys, so what do you think it means to follow Jesus? Because who cares? Really? I mean, it's not really up to me, is it? It's not really up to you, really. But at the same time, we don't want to sit around and just listen to me drone on about the Bible for a while, right? So for me, as a teacher, I'm thinking, how can I get them thinking not just precisely, not just biblically, but how can I challenge their thinking? How can I get them in an uncomfortable spot, or in a place where it's like, ooh, gosh, this really kind of makes me think a little bit. I don't really know. This is a difficult situation. That, when you get a group to that point, then you get them talking. Okay? I want to give you an example of that. So we're going to go ahead and do the exercise, and then I'll stop it at some point. But I really do want you to pretend like you're in a group, and we're going to have a discussion, and we're going to talk about it. Okay? And I want you to pay attention. Don't get lost in the subject. Okay? Pay attention also to how I lead the discussion, and I want you to also pay attention, like, this is a group of people. You guys don't all hang out very much together. Some of you do, but most of you guys are kind of all separate. Watch what happens to the group dynamic as the activity progresses. Okay? So this is also me taking a risk. As a small group leader, you have to take some risks and try some things. So here we go. Okay, So, we've been talking about discipleship in our life group. We're glad you've joined us this week. If you've brought a friend, that's awesome. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. Hope you enjoyed the quiche that I made for you. It was very good. So last week we talked about the question of the definition of a disciple, and we talked about what a disciple is and those sorts of things. And so this week I really want to take us a little bit deeper and talk more about not just what a disciple is, but how we know whether or not we are disciples, and maybe some things related to that question. So in order to do that, I got to make you guys think really quickly, okay? I got to get you guys going, all right? So what I want us to do is I want us to all stand up, and we're gonna do a little bit of a test here. We're gonna do true false, okay? And you have to move based on your answer, okay? So if you're gonna say, I'm gonna say a statement, and if you think it's true, you have to come over here. If you think it's false, you have to come over here, okay? And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask you to defend your answer. But you can get with people on your side, and you guys can kind of help each other out. But we're gonna kind of mingle and kind of figure out kind of the nitty-gritty of this question. So I'm gonna ask the question. I'll say it twice so you can think about it. But I want you I'm not gonna give you hours to think about this question. You have to be quick. Your first gut reaction answer. Okay? And there's no in between. There's no middle. There's no gray. There's no maybe. There's no both. None of that. It's either true or false. Okay? The statement is this: it is possible to be a Christian and not a disciple of Jesus. It is possible to be a Christian and not a disciple of Jesus. True over here, false over here. Whenever you're ready. Yeah. Has everybody had enough time to think? Everybody had enough time? Okay, this is a tough one. All right, so we're not all unanimous on this, which I love. You know you've asked a really bad question, by the way, when everybody goes to one side. Oh, man. So, okay, so we've got some people that feel like that's not a true statement, some people that say it is a true statement. So, what I want you to do is I want you to take 30 seconds and just, obviously with you guys there's kind of be more than one group. So group up with the people and just kind of get on the same page. Like, is this why you came over here? Why did you come over here? Why did you get on this side? Like, why did you choose the side that you did? Really quickly. Go ahead.
State your question one more
Okay, the question one more time. Here's the statement. It is possible to be a Christian and not a disciple of Jesus. It is possible to be a Christian and not a disciple of Jesus. Okay? Make sure you guys are all on the same page, or get more ammo because we're about to go at it here. So now in a normal small group setting, I might actually take a little bit longer in this, but because given the time frame of this and there's some other things I want to teach you guys, I actually have to cut you short, which is good. We're still talking. This is awesome. So I would like to talk to this group first. I'd like to talk to this group first and get an indication of what you guys are feeling. Now, here's the thing. If you guys want to switch sides at any time, you are welcome to switch sides at any time as we're having this dialogue and discussion. But as you stay on one side, you're continuing to say, this is my answer, this is my answer. So you are welcome to switch. So if somebody says something that's convincing to you and you want to skip over and, okay, great, that's fine. So you can switch sides at any time, but we have to pick one side or the other. Okay, so on this side, you said it's true that it is possible to be a Christian and not a disciple. Okay, that is a true statement. So what were some of the reasons that you guys said that is a possibility? Why did you think that?
So to define terms, I guess Christian would be somebody who's a believer.
Okay.
So he's professed his faith in Jesus Christ.
Okay, good.
As his Savior and has become a son.
Okay.
But a disciple, by terms, is student, correct? So
right.
that is somebody who's chosen to study Jesus in an intense way, to know him and everything about him, and to follow him studiously. Okay,
so it's possible to be a believer in Jesus, but not actually studying the life of Christ and the Word and that sort of thing. That's kind of what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay.
Plus, so biblically, then you would see this in that there were 12 disciples, but there were many more that believed in him in profession of faith.
Okay, great. Okay, good. What else? What other reasons did you say that true over here?
I
Okay.
sovereign over when your heart changes for him.
Ah.
Too.
Okay.
You can believe in him and believe what he did for you, but maybe you don't desire that in its fullness yet.
Gotcha. So you understand the distinction not just between believer and student, but more between maybe a commitment level,
Right,
perhaps.
where your heart is.
Ah, okay. Very good. Okay, I understand that distinction. I've experienced that. Any other reasons? Okay, good. Well, with this group then, because you believe that it's possible to be a Christian and not disciple, then you should know yourselves whether you are a Christian or a disciple. So what I would like for you to do now is, if you're a disciple, to come stand over here, and if you're a Christian, to come stand over here. Ready, go.
Is there a middle on this side?
Not a middle on this one either.
I feel like I'm being set up.
Okay. So we got all disciples over here. All right. You guys hold on. Yours is next, okay? You ready? Okay, so here's my question. How do you know that you're a disciple and not a Christian?
It's not a qualified statement, it's just a plain statement by this.
Okay.
Shall all men know you are my disciples if you have love one for another.
Oh,
To the degree in your own heart and mind and before God, you demonstrate that, you prove that very fact.
so like every day, once a
It's
week?
not qualified.
It's not qualified.
It's not. It's
So if I did it once like 30 years ago, I'm still good.
There's one place, the judgment seat of Christ, when all this will be revealed.
Uh-huh.
And there is a person, a kind of person who will suffer loss and will escape even though by fire. He will be saved,
Okay.
but only by fire.
Yeah.
Anything beyond that would be a disciple.
Interesting. So if my opportunity was there a time when you guys became disciples instead of just merely Christians? Could you point to a moment or a day?
Our
Is it
group, John brought up the example of David
okay?
in his life where
Uh-huh.
he had seasons of walking far from God.
Gotcha.
And so you wouldn't call those seasons a season of discipleship.
Okay. So when Peter denies Christ 3 times, he wasn't a disciple of Jesus?
Well,
He lost his discipleship?
no, he's so Matt, I think
I
you're.
think these are provoking questions. That's violating with principle 2.
That's a bomb.
It is. I'm rolling like 3 and 4 hand grenades out at one time now.
So yeah, I mean, so you're almost saying as if he lost his salvation, and obviously there's a completely different question, and the answer to that is no. He's not. He didn't lose his apostleship. He didn't
Okay.
lose his salvation.
Okay.
Was he following the lead of the Holy Spirit? He didn't have the Spirit at that point, so I don't know.
Ah. Was Peter even a Christian at that time?
Oh, he was clearly a Christian.
But Jesus hasn't died and resurrected from the grave yet, so can we even call him a Christian? Look, there's all this other stuff. Anyway, okay, so you guys kind of get what I'm doing, playing and kind of pushing and prodding, and again, if we had lots of time, we would have way more fun with this than we're currently having. But all to say, you guys hang tight. I want to show you the opposite side over here. We'll do over here. So smaller group. You guys said, I said the statement, it is possibly a Christian and not a disciple. Okay? And you guys said that's a false statement. False statement. And why did you guys say it was false?
Well, actually, I misunderstood the question.
Oh, okay. Would you switch sides?
No.
Okay.
Because I think there is a case.
Okay.
And that's the conversion on the cross next to Christ.
Ah, okay.
Because if in fact you believe that he did have a conversion experience, he didn't have a chance to be a disciple. Okay? And so that was the extreme that I had to come up with.
What do you mean he didn't have a chance to be a disciple? I'm not
Well,
understanding
I
that.
think he died on the cross next to Christ.
Uh-huh. So why couldn't he have been a disciple?
Well,
Because he didn't have time to be a disciple.
that was a
doesn't
time
mean that-
element.
Could he not be a disciple while he's hanging on a cross?
That's right, he could have.
Well,
done
he
it.
is quoted in the Bible, so that could satisfy your requirement that way.
Okay, so time out. As I'm listening to you guys, I'm learning about the group dynamic and about the theology of the group as the leader. I'm thinking, okay, I am noticing here that everyone in this group seems to think that discipleship has something to do with behavior and action. And that's not necessarily true. I know, I'm not, but in general, like from what I haven't heard you speak yet, Adam.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
but from what I'm hearing from the group, whether or not I'm a disciple is largely contingent upon whether or not I'm loving someone, or whether or not I've had a chance to share the gospel, or whatever. And so I'm filing that away, because this is a fun group interaction. It's making you guys think it's really good, but I may be hitting on that less than 2 weeks from now in my upcoming group time. I'm like, okay, I need to exploit this, because this is not what the Bible teaches about discipleship or being a disciple necessarily. And so I want to make sure that we get back to this point. This could be a whole other point of tension that I can use to my advantage at another lesson. Does that make sense? But I'm going to choose to not engage with it right now, which is really hard. Okay, because I want to engage with it because I think that it needs to be engaged with, but at the same time, I can't just leave the initial question that I asked. That would frustrate the group, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing?
So Jim, may I ask a question?
Hold
Jim?
on, no, hold on. When you're the life group leader, you get to lead. I'm the life group leader right now. So I completely understand what you're saying, and I think that's a good test case, a good something to think about. What would you think about Judas, for example?
He had plenty of time.
Plenty of time.
And even was recorded as being a participant in lots of.
Okay.
So but he wasn't a believer.
Wasn't a believer in Jesus. Yeah, so it's like the opposite. It's possible to be a disciple and not a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, we won't get to that question. What are the reasons why? Did you guys have other reasons why you chose this side?
I do.
Okay.
I think it's a semantic question. Which you've
Ah.
got over here with what's the Christian and what's the disciple.
Okay.
And to me, that's not a semantic question at all. If you're a Christian, you are a disciple.
Aha.
They're the same thing.
Okay, so they're synonyms.
It can't be true.
Okay.
That's kind of what I was
Same
thinking
thing?
too. Yeah, just because the guy on the cross didn't have time to be a disciple because he died, doesn't mean that he wasn't having that heart.
Interesting.
Immediately. when he
Interesting.
converted, you know.
Okay, so when did you guys become disciples of Jesus?
When we became Christians.
When you became Christians. So, I mean, what if you didn't read your Bible every day or share the gospel with anyone ever, or?
Doesn't matter.
That doesn't violate discipleship. I don't have an exhaustive list of rules on what makes a disciple.
Mm-hmm.
But
So how, like,
my definition of disciple is I'm serving Christ.
Uh-huh.
If there's no one that, I don't think, maybe there is,
Huh.
that never makes a mistake in their discipleship.
Huh. That sounds a little too easy.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, like, you're becoming a disciple was your choice or not?
I think it was a choice. But I'm thinking of what you're asking in my own conversion. I was 11 years old. John 3:16 was the principle of my conversion. I didn't learn about sanctification and discipleship and that kind of stuff till later in my life. I may have been a disciple and not know it. I mean, that's also a possibility.
Just by your,
My acceptance of
actions.
Christ could have put me in that camp, but I internally didn't understand what was going on until later on.
Which brings us back to its semantics. It's how do you define those terms? And I'll say, when you divided them between disciples and Christians, I was stunned that nobody said, I can't choose because I'm collective.
It's an interesting.
But nobody did. Everybody said, I'm a disciple,
Okay,
I'm
so
not a Christian.
hold on a second.
They decided we're disciples, but there obviously are no Christians.
Yeah.
There's no Christians on
Well,
that
to be
side
a
of the
disciple
road.
is to be a Christian, obviously. Anybody want to change sides? Anybody want to switch over? Did anybody convince anybody else? We got more entrenched. All right. Okay, good. All right, well, let's move on to another topic. We're done.
Great question.
We'll be demonstrating this exercise.
John, remind me again what time I need to finish? 10:45? Is that right?
Yeah.
10:30?
10:45.
10:40? You tell me.
Yeah, 11 o'clock is when church starts.
11 o'clock is when church starts, so 10:45, I guess? Okay. So I do this exercise with my students, and I completely change the subject and go on to something else at that point. I don't finish it. In fact, and I spend, last time I did it, I probably spent 45 minutes just on that exercise alone, asking more follow-up questions, challenging their responses with additional questions to make them think about the issue even deeper. People hopping back and forth to both sides, people starting to get a little bit flustered and frustrated and like, I have to get the answer right. I need to know the right answer. And that's just like, it's gold. It's so money when you get your people to that point, because it provokes learning and it fosters discussion, and they're actually going to get in their car and drive home and have a conversation with their spouse about what you talked about in small group because of just asking a question, you know? All right, so I don't want to talk about the topic, okay? So for those of you guys that are still a little bit wanting to establish your opinion, you need to let it go at this point. You can talk about it after class. But I want to debrief, and I want you to tell me what you saw in terms of depth, how we were able to get beneath the surface, how I behaved, and what were some of the principles that you saw, and how we used questions and group dynamic discussion stuff.
I'd just start with just the whole exercise itself. You having everybody stand up and move to a side made it was a simple true or false. So there's, they're not breaking up into 10 different subsections or something. But having everybody stand up and moving, you're forced to engage.
Right, yeah.
Instead of just sitting around here and...
Raise your hand if it's true, put a thumbs up, thumbs down, like totally different feel if we would have done it that way, right? Yeah, good.
I like the ownership. It wasn't what I read or what I heard someone say or maybe my background, it was what I thought. And then I had to
stand up for it.
One spot or the other.
Yeah, you really had to be accountable for what you believed. It wasn't just like, I'm going to sit back here and think whatever I want to think. And everyone has to participate. In some discussions in life group, a lot of people will talk, or only 2 or 3 people will talk out of the 10 or whatever. Everyone's participating. Even if they don't speak and tell you why, they're still saying something and doing something with the group, which forces participation. That's good. What else did you notice?
The way you posed the question forced a division so that it became, there's controversy to defend one another or to debate.
Okay.
It'd be interesting to see how you deal with it. If everybody believes exactly the same thing, and you say, okay, y'all divide up here, and your first question, and then you had that on the other side of the room where everybody went one way. Well, now you've got a dilemma. If your first question, everybody went to the same side of the room, you have no controversy. You have no debate.
And this goes back to what we talked about last week in preparation and how you're going to handle the environment and the group time. Because not only have I prepared a question that's very specific and very exact, because I want it to provoke tension in the group. I want it to be unusual, unexpected, and that could maybe be rule number 8 of a good question, is that it creates tension. But I'm having to think through, in good preparation, the scenarios that could come from the question that I ask. So obviously I thought through the scenario of what would happen if the group divided in half, but I also have to think about, well, what am I going to do if the entire group says it's false? What am I going to do if the entire group says it's true? And how am I going to handle those things? I have to think about that. I have to anticipate those things prior to coming into the group. Otherwise, I'm going to get flustered. I'm not going to know what to do. And all of a sudden, it gets really awkward really quickly. I got everybody to stand up. They're standing around. And now I look like I don't know what I'm doing. And that's when it gets real awkward. So you have to, again, be prepared going into those situations. If you're gonna pull the pin out of a hand grenade and you're gonna roll it out into the middle of your group, you got to be ready to pick up the pieces, whatever happens. So you got to really think through that. Good. What else?
It just dawned on me sitting here. The question caused me to reflect on my own behavior, my own motivations, and And I think that's probably a real key issue when asking questions. There's all kinds of information questions you can disagree on.
Mm-hmm.
When the question itself gets below the surface like that.
And it gets you thinking about how you behave, and especially the question, are you a Christian or are you a disciple? That's when it's really now. This isn't just a head in the clouds, theory, doctrine, but now this is real. This is me. Do I consider myself a disciple or not, and why? And whoa. Not only is it good for you as the participant, it's really good for me. Because what happens if I do that in the group and half of my group says they're Christians and half of my group says they're disciples? That's great insight for me. That's money. So now I'm picking up stuff, and I'm not telling them, but I'm keeping track of it. I'm noticing it. Because now I know that when I have lunch with Bob over here and he said he was a Christian, I want to ask him more about that. So Bob, why don't you consider yourself a disciple? What's going on, man? And it created a great lunch conversation for me and Bob because of something that I noticed during a group discussion that was about a topic that we were studying that week. So it really does help get out of the clouds and into real life, genuine life. Good. Mm-hmm. What else?
A question that has no wrong answer, or in your mind.
The question that I asked?
Right. Did you purposely pick a question that potentially has no wrong answer, or are you in your mind half of us were right and half were wrong?
Right. Because we're not actually doing a curriculum based on all of these things, yes, it has an answer, and I have an answer to that question that I'm wanting to enforce, but I may not answer it until the end of that lesson or the end of the study. Like, I get to choose when to answer the question based on what kind of tension it creates, what kind of interest it creates. If I can tell they're not really that interested in the question, all right, there you go, here's the answer, here's what I think. But if it's really creating some debate and some good dialogue for us, I'm just going to sit back. You know you're doing a good job asking questions and getting people below the surface when questions stop coming to you and they start going to each other. Okay? That's what you're shooting for. Okay? If you can get that, if it's not just you have to be the bounce back point for the questions, but if you can kind of slink back and disappear and let them ask questions, now you're into a whole nother level of depth, vulnerability, people getting to know each other. Let people get a little tense. It's okay. I mean, it's all right. They'll survive.
Yeah, I think the one thing you did to stimulate that was every time someone gave an answer, you asked a question back.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's some times when you don't want that. And for me, in this particular situation, I know I only have a limited amount of time. And so I don't want that to start. And so I'm going to jump in and not let cross-dialogue start happening because I want to stay in control of the situation because of the time. Anytime you're turning over the keys to the group, you can't just rein it back in and say, okay, stop talking. Oh, hey, we're having a moment here. What? You know that if you're getting it into that, it's at least 10 minutes minimum, probably. So you have to be you can't throw a hand grenade out there when there's only 3 minutes left in the deal. I mean, unless you're wanting to provoke something for the following week. But you're right. Good job noticing how I didn't allow that this particular time around. Good. What happened to the group? What happened to the group dynamic? Did you notice anything in particular? Y'all were chatty. Really chatty. Like, a couple times I just kind of started talking. There was a good solid 30 seconds before you stopped talking so I could continue. I'm like, this is great. That's a great problem to have as a small group leader. Hey, all right, really, let's settle down here and don't you want that? Okay? If I were to tell you that I was going to have activities like this every week, would you want to come back?
Sure.
Yeah, this is kind of stimulating. I might actually kind of start thinking about this when I go to church next hour. If I don't like the sermon, I'm going to be kind of drifting off. Looking through my Bible, I don't know, what scripture would I use? If I was the small group leader on that, how would I teach that? Or blah, blah, blah. It keeps you thinking. It keeps you searching. It keeps you hungry. It keeps you engaged. And that's where I want to finish this morning is because when you get to a place of depth, when you get to a place of vulnerability, when you get to a place of good engagement with your group, you will find you have some leverage when it comes to commitment. Okay? The greater the challenge of your group, the greater the intimacy, the greater the trust, the greater the depth of your group, the more incentive there is for the members of your group to attend. Okay? A lot of you guys expressed frustration last week about commitment level, people not being able to come. Now, sometimes kids have soccer games and basketball and, underwater basket weaving, parent seminars and whatever, There's some of those things you can't control, no matter how interested they are in the group that you're doing. However, if you can cultivate a group that allows and creates interest and depth and there's meaning, I feel like if I miss this group, I'm missing something not just that's nice, not just that would be beneficial, but now something that's necessary, right? I will rearrange my schedule to make it possible for me to attend something like that. Now, commitment is a character issue. The people in your group may have character flaws when it comes to their ability to make and keep commitments. Okay? But a lot of times people they've got a lot of things going on in a week and they have to make choices as what's going to make the calendar and what's going to get cut. And those are the people that are probably attending your life groups most of the time. I want you guys to be leading your groups in such a way that your group makes the cut. Okay? And that puts a lot of pressure on you, and for good reason. Because these groups are important. They're significant. They're not just things that we're doing, we're jumping through hoops. We're not just doing them because Bethel tells us to do them. We're doing them because we believe in the power of the gospel. We believe in the power of fellowship. We believe in the power of the study of God's word. We believe in the power of praying together and taking action in our community together. We believe that is so significant that it warrants another gathering together, not in a large group, but in a smaller group. And that gathering is something that can affect people's following of Christ. And if it can affect people's following of Christ, it can affect the salvation of other people that are in the spheres of influence of the members of your group. Okay? So I've got 5 minutes. I want to give you just really quickly a few other ideas on cultivating commitment in your group. And other ways that you can cultivate depth. I forgot. There's a few other things. So very, very quickly. A few other ideas on how to cultivate depth in your group, which we can't exactly do in this room, but require more time and more commitment. Shared experience is huge. Common shared experiences. And here's the thing. They have to be common shared experiences that are not your weekly group meeting time. Even though that's a common shared experience, it doesn't necessarily carry any weight unless something significant happens during that common shared experience. If somebody, flops on the ground and starts speaking in tongues and, something like totally weird and everybody was a part of it and we all had to deal with it together and I don't know what happened, like that could be a situation. But it's more along the lines of taking a trip together, where on that trip, let's say you guys are going to Huntsville and doing prison ministry together as a life group or something like that. But on that trip, you don't just get one flat tire, you get two. And it's raining and muddy, and all of a sudden, you guys have to work together to change a couple flat tires on a couple of the vans you're driving down there in. All right? That's going to do something for your group dynamic. Now, I'm not saying to sabotage your tires or anything like that. But life happens when you're traveling. Life happens when you're doing things outside of your house. When you meet, the more often you meet together, the more likely you are for things to just happen. That's why Jesus always wanted his disciples with him. Because when they were with him and people came up to him that had leprosy, or when people came up that were blind, or when Pharisees challenged his authority or whatever, not only could he handle the person that was approaching him, he also would be able to use it to help teach and cultivate things with his group. I take my Forge students to Israel every year. I take them to Atlanta, to Los Angeles, to Dallas, Fort Worth, and stuff happens. Stuff that I've planned, and stuff that I haven't planned. And every time stuff that I haven't planned happens, it's always the best. Even if it's bad, it's always really good. We end up having mechanical problems on our flight to Israel a number of years ago, miss our flight to Tel Aviv, and we're a whole day and a half late getting to Tel Aviv. Horrible. Worst 48 hours of my life, quite possibly. But then, one of the first lessons we talk about is a lesson about waiting. And we got to have a very interesting conversation about what it was like to sleep in an airport and wait for a flight to take us over an ocean. And wonder if God is going to let us even go, because all the flights are always booked. And how is he going to make room for a group of 50 people on a flight that typically only has 1 or 2 open seats? And then watch and see how God provided for that in just one flight. Amazing. So those kinds of opportunities. Shared experiences do something for you. Good questions, obviously. Knowing your group really well. If your group is filled with a bunch of outdoorsmen, you better get your group outside somehow. Have your group around a campfire. Buy a little chimenea or a little outdoor fire pad. Just sit around the fire. Just have it out on the back patio, right? Just knowing your group well will help create a better environment. And then about commitment, a couple things here on commitment. Especially in life groups, you guys all have to come up with is a covenant a requirement for a life group, or no?
We certainly give them one to think through of what they want to do.
Okay.
So it's probably yes.
Okay. Well, defining and agreeing with each other on what commitment looks like is really important. That's really hard to do on the front end. So I would recommend for new small groups, especially, maybe having it just kind of be open season for the first semester. So if you start the small group in the fall, it's just kind of open-ended, and then you guys come to an agreement about what commitment's going to look like for the spring semester, rather than trying to enter into some sort of big, hefty commitment with a bunch of people who don't know each other. They don't know what the group's going to be like. They don't know if it's going to be worth their commitment. They don't know they want to commit to it. And then if it's not something they're interested in, then they're now stuck in something that they don't exactly want to do, which I think is good. I think you can work with that. That's a whole nother conversation, though. So I would recommend, 6 weeks or a semester worth of evaluation time, and then make the commitment midway, and then reevaluate and keep the group together that way. You have to model what you expect. You have to model what you expect when it comes to commitment. So if they can tell you're not preparing, or you're preparing at the last minute, or you're rolling out the popcorn because you didn't take time to make some really good quiche or whatever, if they can tell that you're not super committed, they're not going to be any more committed than you. A student will never be above his teacher, as Jesus tells us. Thirdly, cultivate a group that people want to be a part of. Cultivate a group that people actually don't want to miss. Cultivate a group that makes the cut every week. And that's where I want you guys, if you're struggling with that, talk to me, talk to John. We'll help you brainstorm some ideas. We'll help you get in the weeds with that. We'll go to lunch. We'll sit down and brainstorm some ideas. But sometimes you can even take your group members out and say, hey, how are you enjoying the group? What are some of the things that we've done that you've really enjoyed? What are some things that we've done that have been kind of boring? Open yourself up to criticism. What's boring? What do we do that's lame? Ask. People will tell you. They're just not telling you because you're not asking them, because it's impolite just to say, hey, this group is boring. They're just not telling you that. So ask them from time to time. Pass out a survey or send them an email or something. Invite feedback from your group members, and that will help you as well. And then finally, always reevaluate what you're doing in terms of how you're leading, and then what the commitment is for your group on a regular basis. So I don't think your commitments should be any longer than 6 months for a life group, or really for a Bible study. Because these are the seasons that most of our lives move on. They move in a fall, they move in a spring, they move in a summer. Okay? So some of you guys may choose to do 4-month commitments or 3-month commitments, and that's fine. but certainly no longer than 6 months, because how much has your life changed in the past 6 months to where you might not commit to something now that you would have committed to 6 months ago, right? The members of your group are the same way, okay? So let's not overburden them. Let's keep it to a place where they actually can make a commitment. Let's not make them make a commitment that's not really realistic or that they don't want to keep. Okay? Make sense? Next week is going to be very fun for me because I nerd out on this stuff. But next week we are going to be talking about assessment. And how do I assess a group? And then how do I assess the individuals in my group so that I know how to effectively lead them? So what curriculum should I choose? What should we do for our next small group meeting? Should we split our group or not? Who are the people in my group that are good potential small group leaders? How do I know how my group's doing, and how do I know how the people in my group are doing, what that looks like? And we'll get into that next week. Okay? Great. Do we have to reset the room, John? Does it matter, or we can leave the circle?
No, I think this will be the way it is when we get back next week.
Great. Awesome. We'll start in the circle next week. Cool. And maybe we'll have another fun little question time or something like that. So next week we're going to talk about assessment, and hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday. Don't forget, there's donuts.